So, there's an age-old mystery that I'm going to unfold for you this morning, and I am going to satisfy this mystery once and for all. And the mystery is, what does Jesus have to do with the bunny and the egg? And here is the conclusion of that mystery. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Jesus has no connections, no associations with a rabbit. Well, he created the rabbit, but it's got nothing to do with the resurrection. It's got nothing to do with the reality of life being transferred in a place of death. Life. The bunny and the egg is about fertility. We're not into fertility. We don't lift up fertility rites. And so we don't celebrate Easter in the classical sense. In the traditional sense, I guess I should say. We celebrate first fruits. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. Every year we go through this, and I always try to approach this from a slightly different angle. So we celebrate first fruits. Why first fruits? Because first fruits is really about, of course, the resurrection. Chris read from 1 Corinthians chapter 15 this morning, which is all about the resurrection and, of course, the first fruits. So this is what I'm going to do this morning. I'm going to, first of all, I just solved an incredible ancient mystery, which is good. But we're going to talk about first fruits and the harvest. So this morning, as I got up and began to prepare to come over, you know, I always, on a Sunday morning, I try to leave it completely open for Jesus to determine what I'm going to do. And I did that this morning. And again, that's not always a comfortable thing because sometimes it gets down to the wire. And I sit there sometimes at 10 o'clock and I don't have a message. And suddenly I receive a message. But this happened about 7:30, 8 o'clock this morning. I got up and I was preparing to come over. And I said, well, Jesus, what would you say? What should I say? What would you say through me? And I heard the harvest. The harvest. And so, okay, we'll focus on the harvest. So this morning, that's what we're doing. First fruits and the harvest is the official title of the sermon, in case the guys back there were wondering. So now, let's talk about first fruits, first of all. Let's go to the source. Let's go to the Bible. Of course, you've heard us say many, many times that we are sola scriptura. And what does that mean, sola scriptura? It means that we're Bible-only people. We believe the Bible. There used to be a bumper sticker that says, the Bible says it, I believe it, and that settles it. I need to get one of those again. So we're sola scriptura people. We believe the Bible. Like I said earlier, we don't only believe the Bible, but we practice what the Bible tells us to practice. So, first of all, in Leviticus chapter 23, God gives us his festivals. Let's read a little bit from Leviticus chapter 23. I'm going to read 1 and 2. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, the Lord's appointed times, which you shall proclaim as a holy convocation, my appointed times are these. And he goes on to list the 7 festivals that are his festivals. He also would list, first of all, the Shabbat, the weekly Shabbat and the annual Shabbats and so on, all of the Shabbats, the land Shabbats and everything. So the Shabbats are the first thing that he would point to in Leviticus chapter 23. But then he goes on to give reference to the 7 biblical festivals. And this is the first time that we see them outlined in the Bible anywhere. So this was first outlined at Mount Sinai. At Mount Sinai, God gave us his festivals. Now, his festivals, when considered from a linear perspective, they are redemptive. Absolutely points to God's salvation and his redemption. Joyce, are you recording me? Let me make sure I'm Joyce. Are you recording me? Oh, I see. So God says here in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 9 and 11, let's read it. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when you enter the land which I am going to give you, right? Now this is the land of Israel that I am going to give you, and reap its harvest, then you shall bring in the sheaves of the firstfruits of your harvest to the priest. So, he's speaking literally about coming into the land of Israel. And when you come in, you reap the land, and when you do, you bring the first offering to the priest. He shall wave the sheaf before the Lord for you to be accepted. For you to be accepted. So you see, that sheaf is being waved for our acceptance. That's important to consider. I should say our acceptance, but also our inclusion. On the day after the Shabbat, the priest shall wave it. So this is the Shabbat that relates to what? First fruits. Of course, it's also the Shabbat that relates to Pesach. So following Pesach, which is on the 14th of Aviv, the following Shabbat, the day after the following Shabbat, is always first fruits. Always first fruits. So there was a question posed to me this morning based on a statement I made about a week ago this morning concerning Good Friday. So I do want to just address that quickly before we go forward. So I said last Sunday, that Jesus was actually led to the cross on a Thursday. And it did raise some questions. And I understand why. Now, Jesus said very clearly, and Joyce can look this up for us, that the Son of Man will be in the earth like Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights. 3 days and 3 nights. The problem with Good Friday being Friday is that it's only 2 days, not 3 days and 3 nights. Now, some people are confused because the Gospels clearly state that it was approaching Shabbat before the crucifixion, and they had to get him off the cross quickly because they had to go through the process quickly because the Shabbat was coming. So then they say, oh, of course it was on a Friday. No. Pesach is a Shabbat. So the Shabbat that was being referenced in the Gospels concerning getting him processed quickly was actually the Pesach Shabbat. So that particular week you had 2 Shabbats, one after each other. You had the Pesach Shabbat, because Pesach, Passover, is a Shabbat, and you had the weekly Shabbat. So you understand why it's 3 days, starting from Thursday to Sunday morning. Yes, Joyce? You got the answer for me? Go ahead. I'm teaching this morning. Maybe I'll preach about 2 o'clock, but go ahead. Mm-hmm.
They celebrated Passover, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then they celebrated first fruits.
All right. Based on what God told them to do at Sinai. Right. Based on what we just read, yes. So we fully expect that following that Pesach Shabbat, the next Saturday Shabbat, that Sunday morning, they all went out and they picked sheaves just like this, something just like this, and they would have given it to Eleazar, who was the priest at the time, and Eleazar, or maybe Phinehas, one of those, perhaps Phineas, would have gone before the Ark of the Covenant and waved it before God. Now, what does it say? So that you would be accepted, right? So that you would be accepted. That's very important. So, did I clear up anything on the Thursday, Good Friday? It's really simple. Christianity has made a grave error in regards to calculating the day of the cross. It cannot be Friday, because then Jesus would have been in the tomb for 2 days and 2 nights. Yes?
When was the Last Supper celebrated?
He celebrated his Last Supper before Pesach. He had to, because he was a Passover lamb. So the Wednesday night is when he would have celebrated Pesach. He would have had his dinner. You guys are comfortable? You might be here until 4 o'clock. Yes.
So is unleavened bread, does first fruits always end unleavened bread, or can it end?
No.
Can first fruits be
No.
before unleavened bread ends?
Right.
Unleavened bread is 6 days.
Right. Unleavened bread begins at Pesach, right at the moment, on the 14th of Aviv. Now, Sometimes, for instance, in the time of Jesus, Pesach was on a Thursday, all right? Sundown on Thursday, right, begins Pesach. Well, in every case, the next Shabbat, following that Shabbat, is first fruits. In the case where we are right now, last Saturday night began Pesach, right? So Pesach was, Saturday, Sunday, and then the next Shabbat to follow was yesterday. And so today is first fruits. Yes?
They couldn't have crucified him on the Shabbat anyway.
No. They wouldn't have, because the gospel is clear. I think it's in John's gospel. Maybe you can look that up. You got the device. It stated clearly that the Pharisees wanted the process to expedite because the Shabbat was approaching. But it wasn't the weekly Shabbat, it was the Pesach Shabbat. Had to be, right? Anyway, so maybe I'll forego teaching, I'll begin to preach right away. How's that? No, that's that. So first fruits, all right. So very, very clearly, this is an agricultural festival. It's about agriculture, all right? So the high priest, in the case when the people of Israel came into the land of Israel, would have been, someone can look this up, either Pinchas or Eleazar, I'm not sure. At any rate, whoever it was would have stood there and waved this before God, based on God's command, symbolic of the harvest to come. You see, this is what this represents. As a kid, I used to, quite often, like I said to Larry this morning, I didn't want to eat what my mom cooked, believe it or not. Today, I would give anything for some of what she cooked. But when I was a kid, 9, 10, 12 years old, I didn't want liver rice and lentil peas. The liver rice and lentil peas was on a Thursday, and on and on and on. They had my mom had set days for set foods. We had mincemeat with rice and potatoes. Listen, I would give anything for that today. But back then, it wasn't so attractive. And we will run out into the woods, into the mountains, and we'll hunt iguanas. Don't run away yet. We'll hunt iguanas with slingshots, doves, and we'll roast them up on a fire, and we'll just live up in the mountains for a day or so. But as we walk through the fields and sometimes the sides of the mountain, we will pick grain like this and pop them open and eat them. They have to be green like this. The point is, this is green. It's not ready for harvest. Come Shavuot, how long is Shavuot from today? Count 7 Shabbats. Count 7 Shabbats. Shavuot is when the harvest is ready. And so, come harvest time, the wheat is milled and processed and baked into 2 breads and waved before God. And that's what we will do in about 49 days, 50 days. And that's the essence of first fruits. So what does the resurrection have to do with agriculture? It has quite a bit. And I'm going to belabor to make that point this morning. It's not a difficult point to make, by the way. So, first fruits. All right, so is there anything you whacked out, preacher, that says that first fruits is about resurrection? You're talking about agriculture. You're talking about wheat. What in the world are you talking about, preacher man? Prove this to me before I get up and leave. All right, so here we go. Paul now speaking in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, says it quite succinctly and completely. He makes it very clear that the first fruits is about resurrection. It points to the harvest. And the point that we're going to see here that Paul makes is that Jesus is the first fruits of that great harvest. He is the first fruits of the great and first resurrection. Some would say, well, wait a minute, Jesus was the first resurrection. Yes, he represented the first resurrection when he resurrected on that morning, but he was the first fruits of that resurrection which is to come. You follow me? So he is the first fruits of the great resurrection that's before us. There will actually be 2 resurrections. The resurrection of the judgment seat of Christ, which will occur when he comes, he being the first fruit of that resurrection. Let me say this. He would not be able to judge the living and the dead had he not resurrected. He resurrected in order to be in such a position to carry out the work of the kingdom. He was a foretype, an example of the new creation. And so there's a second resurrection that will in fact come. It will come at the judgment seat of God himself, which is the great white throne judgment. When does that come? At the end of the millennial kingdom. So there will be two resurrections, the resurrection of Christ and the resurrection of the Holy One of Israel. The resurrection of the Holy One of Israel involves all of humanity. All of humanity from Adam to Gog. And you know what I mean from Adam to Gog. You know what I'm referring to. Gog is the prince of Meshach and Tubal that will bring the final rebellion against God. And he will die together with his army. But from Adam to Gog, every human being will resurrect at the second resurrection and stand before God, except for Jesus, those in the first resurrection. That's what it says in Revelation chapter 20. Those who had part in the first resurrection, that's who we are, will have no part in the second resurrection or the lake of fire. All right? So I hope that cleared it up quite a bit. Whoa, I'm not sure. So let's go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 15 now and read what Paul says. 20 to 23. I believe that, Chris, you read this? Did you read this? Yes. I'll read it. We'll read it again. Would you like to come up and read? No? I was going to give you the honor to come up and read. That's okay. But now Messiah has been raised from the dead, very vivid, the first fruits of those who are sleeping or are asleep. So he was the first fruits of a resurrection. Since by man came death, by man also came the resurrection of the dead. Again, that's what I meant just now when I said this. He had to come as the Son of Man, be sinless, be the Lamb, and be offered up on behalf of sin, resurrect and stand before God in order to accomplish the victory over death. You follow? So he was victorious over death and sin so that he can accomplish that broader victory over sin and death. For as in Adam all died, also in Messiah all will be made alive, but each in his own order. Messiah the first fruits. After that, those who are Messiahs at his coming. So there is that clear and concise reference to the first resurrection, the great resurrection. It's referring to the harvest. You see, that's the essence of first fruits and Shavuot. The first fruits picked and waved before God so that we can be accepted. Like I said, also to be included. And then being included, of course, we will be a part of the great harvest, which is the first resurrection. Is that clear, or did I muddle that up just a little bit? Is it clear? I'm not sure. So let's talk about the harvest. So resurrection is actually about the harvest. It's about the harvest. It's not about eggs and fish and whatever else we Christians do. Hot cross buns. Who knows what a hot cross bun is? Hot cross bun, right? Us older people, we know what a hot cross bun is. Publix, I think Publix still makes them. You don't know what a hot cross bun is? No. In Orthodox Christianity, even in Protestant Christianity, on this morning, they would bake lovely little buns and take some icing and make a cross on the top of it. So you'd have a circle. When you look at it from the top, you have a circle with a cross right across the middle. Hot cross buns, right? And so I love some hot cross buns. You were not supposed to, when I grew up in the islands, you were not supposed to eat it with anything. No butter, no cheese. Because you violate it, you see, it's holy. So all you do is you eat the hot cross bun. It's a holy event. Now, the symbol of a circle with a cross running right across it, that's not Christian by any means. It is not Christian. What is it? It's Grecian. It's pagan. It's used, you see it a lot in Grecian culture. You see it a lot in pagan cultures. You know what it represents? This might gross you out just a little bit. You know what it represents, folks? I have the evidence for what I'm about to say. It's kind of gross. The hot cross bun, the circle with the cross right across it, is a symbol of the matrix. Now, you need to determine what the matrix is, what I'm referring to. The human matrix. I'm talking about a body part. that's on a female. That's the symbol. It's an ancient symbol. It's a fertility symbol. How could it not be a fertility symbol? I want you to consider that for a moment. Ponder that. Let that stretch across your mind a little bit. It's gross. It's absolutely gross. But pagans have been eating the hot cross bun at this time of the year for millennia. It goes all the way back to Nimrod. Consider that for a moment. We Christians, we don't even know what we celebrate. We don't fully understand what we do. But I loved hot cross buns as a kid. And I'll stop right there at that. Now let's get back to the harvest. So Easter, what we call Easter, has nothing to do with Jesus. It has everything to do with Semiramis, Babylonian culture, fertility rites, all of it. Even the hot cross bun, and you can understand why. So now let's talk about the harvest. Get off of that stuff. Let's talk about the harvest. So Jesus gave a parable. The parable is the parable of the wheat and the tares. That parable actually is very much about resurrection. It's very much about first fruits. It's absolutely about first fruits. And let's read that parable. It's in Matthew chapter 13. Now this is the parable that Jesus gave me this morning as I was standing there getting ready to come over. This is what he said to me, the harvest. And as soon as I heard the harvest, I knew he was referring to this parable. So let's read a little bit of the parable. I think we know the parable. What happens? Matthew chapter 13, 24 to 30. I'll just talk about the parable, but I do want to read for you 36 to 43. That's where we will read, because 36 to 43 of Matthew is the interpretation of the parable. I think we all know the parable. What's the parable? A man planted wheat. A landowner, he planted wheat. And what happened? Someone came and sowed tares in his wheat. And then the workmen, his workers, realized that that had happened. They came to him and said, uh-oh, something really terrible has happened. There's tares among the wheat. You don't want to harvest tares, you want the wheat. So the workman says, what do we do? Do we root up the tares? And he said, the owner of the plantation, the owner of the farm said, no. He said, an enemy has done this. An adversary has sown tares in my wheat. He says, first, pull up the tares and throw them into the fire. Then harvest the wheat and bring them into my barn. That's a parable, right? And it ends pretty bluntly. So his disciples are puzzled. His disciples are saying, what is that about? That made no sense at all. And so they question him following his parable. The parable is profound, and the implications of that parable are deep and profound and does relate to what we're doing here this morning. It relates to so much, but it relates to the resurrection. So now his disciples come to him, and they're saying, please, let me know what that's all about. What was that about? Chapter 13, 36 to 43. Then he left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples came to him and said, explain to us the parable of the tares and the wheat. Clearly, they didn't get it. And he said, the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. So Jesus is the one who sows the wheat, the good seed. And the field is the world. And as for the good seed, these are the sons of the kingdom. These are who we are, the sons of the kingdom. And the tares are the sons of the evil one. That's pretty straightforward. And the field, the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. And the harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. So he gives an understanding there of the parable. The wheat, the sons of God, the sons of the kingdom, that's who we are. The tares, the sons of the evil one. He's the one that sowed the good seed, who we are. And he sowed me as a seed from before the world's foundation, with the hope that I would, in fact, remain focused, remain diligent, and in fact, be brought to harvest. So now let's read it here. Now let's pick it up in verse 40. So just as the tares are gathered up and burnt with fire, so shall it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send forth his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all stumbling blocks and those who commit lawlessness. The words of Jesus. He will send forth his angels and gather out of his kingdom all stumbling blocks and those who commit lawlessness. Is there some lawlessness happening today? On how many levels? On many, 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 many levels. Let's talk about constitutional law, for instance. We're not saying that the constitution of this country or any country is in fact divine, but our constitutional law is being broken. Absolutely. What about just regular laws, common laws? Broken all the time. We're approaching a time in human history where if you are connected, you can get away with breaking laws. We're coming to that place now. Brothers and sisters, our government is given impunity. It is. But what about God's law? What about are God's laws being violated? Absolutely. And those who violate his laws would be lawless and would in fact be stumbling blocks. So the Son of Man, at the day of the harvest, on the harvest, will come and he will reap the tares. The tares will be thrown into the fire and will throw them into the furnace of fire, that place where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now listen up, verse 43 is very important. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. Then the righteous will shine forth. That's not a symbolic statement. That's a literal statement. In other words, those who are righteous will shine with God's glory. It's literal. How do I know it's literal? Because that verse is taken from Daniel. Let's go read it in Daniel. In other words, Jesus quoted Daniel. I can say that he quoted himself. In Daniel chapter 12, let's read a little bit from Daniel chapter 12 concerning what Jesus said in that parable that does in fact relate to the resurrection. On the day of his coming, will we shine? Are we the sons of the kingdom and the daughters of the kingdom? Will we shine on that day? That's a question we need to ask. Will we in fact shine forth on that day, the day of his coming? So in Daniel now, chapter 12, I'm going to read for you. I want to read for you, why not? 1 to 3. First of all, I want to tell you that the idea of a resurrection is actually first presented in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament. It is in the Old Testament that we begin to see the glimpses that points to resurrection. We think of resurrection as only a New Testament or a Christian concept, but it absolutely isn't. The Pharisees, the Jewish believers in God at the time of Jesus were all about resurrection. They knew that there would be a resurrection of the righteous, a resurrection of glory. Why? Because of what it says in the Tanakh. Before we go to Daniel, let's do this. Let's go to Isaiah first. Isaiah chapter 26. There's something here that relates to the resurrection and the resurrection in glory. Isaiah 26. I'm going to read for you 19. If I can get there real quickly. I didn't mark it. So Isaiah chapter 26, verse 19. This verse just sort of comes out from nowhere. And Isaiah, it's as if Isaiah is in prayer, he has a vision, and he doesn't quite understand it, but he relates it. So let's read it. Verse 19, Isaiah 26. Your dead will live, he says. Their corpses will rise. You who lie in the dust, awake and shout for joy, he says. For your dew is as the dew of the dawn. Now, the word dawn there is orah in Hebrew, and it literally means light. This is what happens at dawn, isn't it? At dawn, what happens? The sun comes up, light. So that's what he's talking about, the resurrection. Let's read that last verse there again, that verse I just read. For your dew is as the dew of light, the dew of the dawn. Where does dew come from? It comes from the ground. It rises from the ground. Of course, it comes from the air, and that's quite relevant as well. What initiates the process of dew coming up comes from the air. Jesus will come from the air, but the dew comes up from the ground, doesn't it? It does. In fact, in the book of Genesis, that's what we see. That dew came up from the ground and watered the whole land. So you have dew that rises, but it rises in light as the dawn, as the word there being aurora. And the earth will give birth to the departed spirits. He's talking about the resurrection. Which resurrection? Well, both resurrections. He's talking about the resurrection at the judgment seat of Christ, and he's talking about the resurrection of the Holy One of Israel himself, the great white throne judgment. So you see that? In Genesis, water, vapor, dew will come up from the earth and will water the earth and cause what? Fruitfulness. This is exactly what God is preparing. And that's why your dew will be as the light of the sunrise. We'll get back to that. Also, let's go back to Daniel. Daniel here speaking concerning the resurrection. I do believe that Isaiah and Daniel are referring to the second resurrection. Just my opinion. You might have a different opinion. But I believe that they're both referring to the great white throne resurrection. This is when all of the people of Israel will resurrect before God. So let's read in Daniel. Daniel chapter 12, I should think we should read perhaps 1 to 3. Now at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands guard over the sons of your people, will arise, and there will be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, referring to Israel, everyone who is found written in the book, which is the book of life, not the book of life of the Lamb, there are two different books, will be rescued. That being rescued here literally means being rescued from the earth. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awaken, these to everlasting life, but others to disgrace and everlasting contempt, the wheat and the tares. You see, it's the same concept. Those who have insight will shine brightly like the brightness of the expanse of heaven, and those who will lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. That's the resurrection from Daniel's perspective. Powerful, isn't it? Extremely powerful. Now you see how Jesus paraphrased and quoted from Daniel. He paraphrased in the sense that the wheat and the tares is applicable to what Daniel said. Very much so. I love it. Now, there is a reference here in Malachi that does involve, in fact, the resurrection, but I do believe it's pertinent, it relates to the first resurrection, the resurrection of the church. And we'll talk about why I believe that. So in Malachi chapter 4, the very last chapter of the quote-unquote Old Testament, chapter 4, we have this reference that again, I am absolutely convinced, is referring to the first resurrection, the resurrection of the church, and we'll see why. So what have we seen with the resurrection so far? From Jesus' parable of the wheat and the tares, there's going to be a judgment, a separation, a culling, so to speak, at the time of the resurrection. Wheat and tares, sons of darkness, sons of light, according to Daniel. Right? Now, Malachi brings a whole different perspective. So keep in mind that Daniel said they will shine bright as the sun, the S-U-N. They will shine as bright as the sun. Also, Isaiah in Isaiah chapter 26 made reference to the dawn, the light that will come with the rising sun. Now, I'm not making a case here for going out and praying to the sun come Easter morning. But the sun here is allegorical to what? The S-U-N is allegorical to the S-O-N and his coming. But not only his coming, but our arrival as well. Because the next time he comes, we are shining forth with him. Do you follow me? He comes in glory, and the church comes in glory as well. How many of us will come with him? How much is a myriad? Someone look that up, Miss Joy. Someone. You got a device. How much is a myriad? More than you can count on both hands, right? So myriads and myriads of illuminated beings, new creation beings. I'm not even referring to us as humans. I don't think we will be human. The word human, I think, literally comes from the expression of hewing a tree. What happens when you hew a tree? It falls. We're human. We're fallen, I believe. That's my take. But in that day, we're not humans. We're not fallen humans. We're resurrected, glorified, righteous, shining like the sun on that day. 10,000 of the myriad. So 10,000s of 10,000s of us will return with him, each of us shining forth like the sun. Envision that for a moment. I'll give you exactly 5 seconds. Envision that. Myriads and myriads, each of us shining forth like the sun. And Jesus in the midst of that. 5 seconds. Think about it. What will that look like? Capture that visual if you can. What will that do to the entire planet? It will do exactly what the Bible says. There will be no need for a sun or a moon, because the glory of God will reside over Jerusalem. That's where we're going, folks. And that's why there will be no need for a sun or a moon, because the glory of God will fill the earth. Isn't that what the Bible tells us? It's really wonderful. So let's read from Malachi chapter 4. I'm going to read 1 to 3. For behold, the day is coming burning like a furnace. There's that reference of a furnace again, right? We just picked that up in the parable of the wheat and the tares. And all the arrogant and evildoers will be chaff, or tares, will be chaff. And the day that is coming will set them ablaze, says the Lord of hosts, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch. These chaff will be completely cut off, neither root or branch. No hope of future expression. They're cut off. Where are they going? According to Jesus. Now, hey, I'm not a fire and brimstone preacher all the time, but I'm preaching from that parable of the wheat and the tares, right? Who gave the parable? Did he mention a furnace? Did he mention eternal damnation? Right, he did. I'm just quoting him. But there is an eternal damnation. And those who are tares, those who are chaff, will inherit that place, the furnace. It's not a pleasant thought, but it's absolutely correct. But for you who fear my name, the S-U-N of righteousness will rise with healing in its wings, and you will go forth and skip like a calf out of the stall. There's a tremendous video that you can find on the internet. And the first time I saw it, I couldn't believe it. I was like, I had to look at it 3 times. Somewhere in this country, or maybe it's in New Zealand somewhere, some cattle, cows and calves were released from a barn. You may have seen the video. And as they got out, they started to skip and dance and frolic. It was one of the most amazing videos I've seen, and it touched me deeply. Here are these animals that are pent up, and then they're released to pasture, and they're just frolicking. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that before. Maybe some of you have seen that before. It's wonderful, and this is what the resurrection will mean. For those who are raised from the dead, we will come forth from our place of holding. That's all it was, a place of holding, and we will skip before God. Isn't that wonderful? Let's read that again. But in regards to those who will receive the furnace, but for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness. Now, often we think of the Son of Righteousness as Yeshua, the S-O-N of righteousness, which he is. I mean, he absolutely is the S-O-N of righteousness. But this is not what Malachi is referring to. He didn't mean the S-O-N of righteousness. He meant the Son of Righteousness, which relates to what Isaiah said in Isaiah chapter 26, which relates to what Daniel said in Daniel chapter 12, doesn't it? It's related. It's all interconnected. And in this case, like with Daniel, you're seeing the aspect of judgment, chaff, being separated out. Then it goes on. You will tread down the wicked, for they will be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day which I am preparing, says the Lord of hosts. We don't quite like that verse 3, don't we? A little bit uncomfortable about that verse 3 right there. Let's read it again then. You will tread down the wicked, for they will be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day which I am preparing, says the Lord of hosts. Wow. You're ready to tread down some tears? You feel like you're ready to be resurrected and carry out this ancient prophecy? Well, you will. On the day of the resurrection, you will. On the day of the resurrection, you'll have God's mind. You're not going to be a flaming hot liberal at that time. You're not going to be concerned about the ones who are being judged at that time, because then you will see clearly the reality of the need for judgment. Right now, why does God have to be so heavy-handed? Why the reference of fire? Why separation? Why tears? Why wheat? Why is the wheat better than the tears? Those questions would plague us right now. On the day of the resurrection, they will not. On the day of the resurrection, you will have God's mind, and you will understand his motives, and you'll understand his heart and his mind. What would happen to the wheat if the tares are allowed to grow up with it? All of it will be destroyed. All of it. So the separation must occur for the harvest to qualify, for the harvest to be ready. And to be fruitful, to be bountiful, the wheat must be removed. The tares, the tares sent into the fire. Where does the wheat go? To the barn. To the barn, where the wheat will be processed. And what will come from the wheat? Bread. Which will do what? Feed. Feed and bring life. That reference to the bread, of course, is very pertinent to who Jesus is. But not only who he is, but who we will be. He is the bread of life. We are that priesthood that's associated with him being the high priest, right? Who waved the bread before God. The high priest, again. So life will come forth from this great resurrection that God is preparing. Bread will feed all of God's creation. Now it says something here that I want to point to quickly. In verse 2 of chapter 4, it says, let's read some of it. But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings. So think about it. It's not referring to Jesus. It's referring to him and us on that great day of the resurrection, when that sun rises in the east. There's going to be a sun that will rise over the Mount of Olives. It's going to be a sun like nothing ever seen before. I think it will outshine our sun. Clearly it will. But that sun of righteousness will bring healing. Amen. Healing to what? To a dying, almost dead creation. This creation, God's creation, meddled by us, interfered by us, is dying. Now, I know we don't like to hear about this, but there, you know, the people on the left talks about sustainable growth, right? You know it's a catchphrase for Agenda 21. Sustainable growth. We have to attain to sustainable growth. If you follow sustainable growth to its end, where does it take us? We can only sustain 500 million people. We can only sustain 500 million people. When I say we, humanity. Who's promoting this? The UN, the people on the left, the people on the right. They're all the same. You have two wings of one vulture. That's where we are today. Same vulture, just two different wings. Now, this healing that God is preparing is the life that God will bring into the world when this resurrection occurs, when the sun rises in the east. He's going to heal this broken creation, folks. Amen. He's going to heal this creation. Amen. I've told you before, as a child, I used to go down to the sea wall and stand there and just marvel at what I would see. No, I'm talking about the sea wall at the docks of Trinidad, Port of Spain. In 1969, you can walk down to the docks where all those ships are coming in, and the water was crystal clear, 30 feet visibility all the way out, and there are fish everywhere. I used to stand there and marvel. I just wanted to put a hook into that one. It was amazing as a child. I remember the deep feelings I would have standing there looking at God's creation, just marveling over this. You go to the same spot today, the visibility is about 2 inches. Fish? Please. There's no fish anywhere. Not even a garfish hangs around. What's happening? We're destroying the planet. There's no question to it. But God has a sustainable plan. Amen. The nations, they have a plan. Their plan will unravel, hit the floor, will be burnt up. God will destroy their plan, but God has a plan for our planet. And that plan is me and you. Myriads and myriads of us, together with Yeshua, that will come, that Son of Righteousness, that will arise over the Mount of Olives and position itself over Jerusalem. We, Jesus in us, will bring life to this dying planet. We'll have an entire millennia to do this work. An entire 1,000 years to carry out this wonderful work. Amen. The Son of Righteousness is preparing to rise. Amen. It is. It's going to give hope to humanity. Amen. Nothing else can provide that hope. I want to say it again. Not the Democrats, not the Republicans, not the United Nations, not the League of Nations and their 10-nation plan for the planet. None of them can provide real sustainability. Life. Because there's no life in them. There's no life in Agenda 21. What's Agenda 21 all about? It's about death, actually. How are they going to attain to 500 million people? Someone's got to die. A whole lot of us have to be removed because we're a hindrance, in their opinion, to creation. We are not a hindrance to creation. Jesus in us is the solution for creation. Amen. Now, I'm going to do something that I rarely do, and from time to time it's necessary. Jesus changed my life. He turned me around. I was absolutely sold out to the New World Order. Absolutely sold out to the United Nations. I remember every Saturday morning I would get up, get my bowl of cereal, pack it up with cereal, get in front of the TV, because I wanted to watch the Big Blue Marble. Remember the Big Blue Marble? Who remembers the Big Blue Marble? It was in Puerto Rico, right? Translated. The big blue marble. The world's a big blue marble. I loved it. I got up just to be a part of that. It was produced by the United Nations, sent throughout the world, third world countries mostly. It did stage in this country, but the people in the South didn't want anything to do with it. No, we don't want that nonsense. But around the world, it was really, really propagated. And I use the word propagated because it's propaganda. It is propaganda. But as a child, as a teenager, young teenager, I loved it, the idea that the entire world can be one big blue marble. Everyone gets along just hunky-dory, swimmingly, wonderful. Let's all hold hands and sing the big blue marble. That's what it did to me. It stirred up deep, deep emotions in me of hope for humanity. And I believed it. I looked for it. I wanted it, even at the age of 13. Well, Jesus saw my heart. Standing there in front of that TV with my bowl of cereal, put in hope, being emotionally moved by the United Nations. He saw me, and he shook his head and he said, I'm going to have to do something with him. And yes, he did. He delivered me from the essence, the sense of hope in man's activities. He delivered me way away from it. He interacted with me on a level that only he could. He touched me in a way that only God could. And Jesus was the one, the hands that God used to reach out and touch me. My life has been changed. I've never looked back. I am redeemed. If you don't know Jesus in this way, this is a good time. A good time to call out to him. Talk to him. Say, God, I want to know this Jesus. That preacher is up there going on about Jesus, but I want to know about this Jesus. If you don't know him, this is the time. You know, the series, The Chosen. How many of us have seen The Chosen? There's a nice little line that's carried throughout the series, and it's basically, if not now, when? All right, this is what, in the series, Yeshua said to Mary, when the time had come for him to stand before the elders in Jerusalem, his bar mitzvah, he said it. He said it to his mom in the series, if not now, when? And that line is used throughout the series. And it's going to be used in episode 2 and episode 3 and so on. So you see, it's a very relevant statement. And this is what Jesus did when I met him. He said it to me, if not now, when? And I have to define that. Because when I finally surrendered to Jesus in 1989, when that time came, I knew that this flesh was being devoured by sin. I knew with everything in me that sin was going to be the end of me. I felt it in my body. I felt life disappearing from me. And Jesus came along in the voice of the Holy Spirit and said, you are going to die uselessly if you continue the way you're going. That's what I heard in my mind. You're going to squander what you have and what you can be. And that's when I said, Lord, whatever it takes, if not now, when? I made a full commitment to follow Jesus in 1989. And my life has been changed, transformed. I am blessed. I don't have much, but I have a lot. I don't look like much, but I will. I will. On the day of his coming, on the day of his righteousness, we will all rise. I will rise with you, with him, and we will be light to this world. Light to darkness. Arise and shine, for your light has come. Gross darkness encompasses the nation. But arise, because your light has come. Isaiah chapter 60, 1 and 3. We will all rise and we will provide life to a dying planet. This is what Jesus offered me. And he is so gracious that he offers this to each of us. That we will give up death, hope in this world, and accept life. And live life. And be life. How could I refuse? How can anyone refuse? Just call upon his name. He answers. He never, ever turns away. If you call upon his name, if you ask, he will answer. You think this is a good sign, right? You know, I think where we are today as a planet, there should be kabillions of people running to the altar, so to speak. When you consider what's happening around us and at the rate it's happening, you would think that churches would be filled with people that are saying, Lord, I repent. Instead, what do you have in most churches this morning? Trendiness, hip Christianity. That's what you got. Well, this is ancient Christianity. This is the Christianity of Peter, Paul, John, James, Luke. And I'm calling you, each of us, to a deepened commitment. We live in a time, brothers and sisters, where things are unraveling all around us, and will continue to do so. Our only hope in such a time as this is to have that deep connection to God through Jesus. It's our only hope. He's our only chance to survive. But he's much more than that. I want to just conclude by saying he's much more than just our only hope. He's our future. He is the hope that we will reign in the earth with him and bring life, brothers and sisters, one more time, to a planet that's just about completely gone. You say, it's not that bad. It is that bad. This creation is crying out for its Savior. Paul said it in Romans chapter 8. All of creation awaits the manifestation of the sons of God and the daughters of God. That's what Paul was referring to in Romans chapter 8. He was referring to what we just read in Malachi. The healing that will come to his creation. Didn't Malachi say that? Healing in his wings. Paul understood that. All of creation groans and awaits our manifestation. Because even the creation knows that the Son of Righteousness will bring life. So I want to invite everyone to commit even further in regards to your walk with God. If you don't have a close relationship with Jesus, if not now, when? This is the time.